Okay, let's dive into a historical mystery that, honestly, sounds completely impossible. What if I told you that a book written 1400 years ago is identical to the one you can pick up today? Not just kind of similar, I mean letter for letter, word for word, identical. That's the puzzle we're going to try and solve.
Our first clue isn't some dusty scroll in a museum. It's a number, a living, breathing number. Right now, as we speak, there are more than 10 million people on this planet who have memorized the entire Quran, all 77,430 words of it. Just let that sink in for a second. Imagine a global EMP blast, every book, every computer, every digital file with the Quran on it, poof, gone. The text itself wouldn't be lost, not even for a day. It could be perfectly reassembled from this global network of human hard drives. There's just no other book in history you can say that about. So, that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth is that possible for a text that's 14 centuries old? How was it preserved so perfectly? Well, to figure that out, we've got to follow the clues. And the very first clue, the key to this whole mystery, isn't on paper. It's in people. From day one, the main way the Quran was preserved was through memorization. It was always intended to be, first and foremost, a library of human hearts. And this is where we find this really unique two-track system. See, the Quran wasn't just written down. At the exact same time, it was being memorized by tons of people. You had this oral tradition and a written tradition running in parallel, constantly acting as a check and balance on each other. The people who pull off this incredible feat of memory are called a Huffaz. And this isn't some new thing. Right from the very beginning, when the Prophet Muhammad would receive revelations, his followers would memorize them on the spot. And that tradition has literally never stopped. Now, this wasn't like memorizing a poem for school. It was a seriously rigorous discipline. Every Hafiz has what's called an isnad, which is basically a chain of transmission. It's a verifiable list. They can name their teacher, who could name their teacher, and so on, creating this unbroken human chain stretching all the way back to the 7th century. You can literally trace it from the prophet to his companions, then passed from teacher to student, generation after generation after generation. It's this living, breathing link that connects the millions of people who have it memorized today directly back to the original source. It's incredible. Okay, so that's the Library of Hearts, but what about the other track, the written one? While all this memorizing was going on, the text was also being written down on whatever was around, scraps of leather, palm leaves, even bone. So how did all those scattered fragments become a single unified book? Well, the big push actually came from a tragedy. A little while after the prophet died, a fierce battle broke out, and dozens of these expert memorizers, these living libraries, were killed. It was a huge shock, and it created this sudden race against time to gather every written piece into one master copy. A few years later, that was followed by a big project to standardize it and send perfect copies out across the growing empire. And the man in charge of that first compilation, Zayd ibn Thabit, had this amazingly strict system. He wouldn't just accept a written verse. Nope. He had to have it confirmed by at least 2 witnesses who could swear they heard that exact verse with their own ears directly from the prophet. The written evidence had to match the living, breathing evidence. So for centuries, that's the story we had, this incredible dual system of memorization and written text. But then, modern science came along. And suddenly, we had a way to actually test the claim with cold, hard physical evidence. And the discoveries were just staggering. You've got the Birmingham manuscript, which radiocarbon dating placed smack dab in the middle of the prophet's own lifetime. Then there are the Sana'a manuscripts, found hidden away inside a mosque wall in Yemen. There are even copies that are believed to be the originals from that big standardization project in the 650s. So what did all these ancient fragments show us? Well, here's the kicker. From Yemen to the UK, across centuries and continents, they all confirmed the same text. Scholars didn't find any lost books or alternative versions of the Quran. What they found was just unbelievable consistency. And here's where it all comes together visually. On the left, you're looking at a script from a manuscript that's nearly 1,400 years old. On the right, the same exact passage from a Quran you could buy today. The result? Identical. The archaeological proof perfectly matches that Library of Hearts. Now, to really understand why this is such a big deal, we kind of need to zoom out and put it into historical context. I mean, how does this compare to how other ancient texts were passed down? When you put the histories side by side, the difference is pretty stark.
The Quran was compiled and standardized within about 20 years. For the New Testament, that process took over 300 years. And that time gap has a huge effect. For the Quran, you end up with a few minor differences in pronunciation. For the New Testament, scholars have documented over 300,000 textual variants. And let me be super clear here. This isn't about disrespecting any other tradition. It's not a theological argument. It's purely about historical methodology. The goal is to see what makes the Quran's preservation system, that unique parallel track of mass memorization and early writing, so different in the ancient world.
So where does all this leave us? Let's sum it up. We've got an unbroken oral tradition that's still alive today, a super meticulous early compilation process, and now modern archaeology that confirms the whole thing.
You know, what's fascinating is the text itself seems to know how unique it is. It actually issues this direct challenge right there in its pages that stood for 1,400 years. If you doubt where this comes from, go ahead, try and produce even one chapter like it. So when we weigh all the evidence, this is the conclusion we land on. We have a text that claims to be from a divine source, and the historical and archaeological record shows that it has been preserved with a verifiable, word-for-word accuracy that is, quite frankly, unmatched in history. Which, of course, leaves us with one last massive question. Does this unique preservation point to the book's own claim of a divine guard watching over it? Or is it simply the most extraordinary testament to human devotion and meticulous preservation that the world has ever seen? What do you think?